I never believed a single decision could alter the course of an entire life until the night I said yes to Adrian Hale. The city had been burning long before that night, not in flames, but in secrets, and the silent wars fought behind glass towers and private meetings. I was never meant to be a part of that world. I was a journalist, chasing stories no one dared to print, believing truth could save people. I didn't realize how dangerous truth could be until it came for me. It started with a single article, an exposé on the Hale Syndicate's secret dealings with Leone Corporation. Names, numbers, offshore accounts. It was supposed to be my masterpiece, my redemption after years of small, ignored stories. Instead, it became my death sentence. Within 24 hours of publication, my editor vanished. My apartment was broken into, and every shadow on the street started whispering my name. I tried to run. I booked a train under a false name, hid in a motel with flickering lights and broken locks. But the city never truly lets go of its prey. That's when Adrian found me. He walked into that motel like he owned it. And maybe he did. His presence filled the air before his words did. And I remember thinking, he didn't look like the kind of man who would send threats. He looked like the kind of man who delivered them personally. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me, his eyes assessing, cold, unreadable. Then he placed a folder on the table, my photos, my research, my life in print. Every secret I thought I'd buried was right there in front of me. He told me I had two choices: disappear or become untouchable. I didn't understand what he meant until he took out a simple gold ring. "Marry me," he said, "and no one will ever touch you again." The words didn't sound like a proposal. They sounded like a verdict. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Was it protection or possession? I didn't know. But I knew that the men who wanted me dead were his enemies too, and that made me valuable, at least for a while. That night, under the cold light of a city that never slept, I said yes. Not out of love, not even out of trust, but out of survival. I became Mrs. Adrian Hale. And the moment the ring slid onto my finger, I stopped being the hunter and became the hunted. Only now, my cage was lined with diamonds. I moved into his penthouse the next morning, floor-to-ceiling glass, silence so deep it felt like an ocean, and guards at every door. He said it was for my safety, but I knew better. Safety was another word for control. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his voice carried a gravity that made obedience feel like instinct. Yet there were moments, fleeting, unguarded, when I caught something else behind his eyes, a shadow of pain, or perhaps guilt. I told myself it didn't matter. I would stay until it was safe to leave. I would learn his world, his rules, and then I'd find a way out. But I underestimated how seductive power could be, how intoxicating it felt to no longer be prey. The city whispered our names like a myth. The journalist who exposed the mafia and the man who married her to keep her alive. Everyone had their theories. No one knew the truth. And neither did I. Because what began as a deal for protection would soon become a war for my soul. The first week felt like living inside a dream built by someone else. a dream too expensive, too polished, too dangerous to belong to me. Every surface in Adrian's penthouse gleamed like ice, every reflection a reminder that I didn't belong here. The city stretched endlessly below, but I was more trapped than ever. He kept his promises. No one followed me, no one threatened me, no one even dared to whisper my name. But in exchange for safety, I surrendered my freedom. Every step I took was watched, every phone call was monitored, every door locked from the outside. The staff moved like ghosts, silent and precise, obeying unspoken rules. They never looked me in the eyes. When I asked questions, they bowed slightly, as if waiting for Adrian's permission to breathe. At night, I could hear him in the next room, his low voice carrying through the walls, speaking to people who only existed in shadows. I'd hear names, Leone, Varga, De La Cruz, whispered with the weight of war strategies, and sometimes silence followed, the kind that only came after someone made a fatal decision. I told myself not to care. I was only surviving, waiting for the right moment to disappear. But the more I observed him, the more the lines blurred. Adrian Hale wasn't just a criminal. He was something far more complicated. A man who built an empire from ashes and carried its ghosts in his eyes. Every move was deliberate, every word sharpened to precision. He ruled through fear, but not chaos. His enemies called him ruthless. His people called him necessary. And I didn't know what to call him. He never raised his voice, yet when he entered a room, time seemed to obey him. One night, I found him standing on the balcony, cigarette in hand, city lights painting his face in fragments of gold and blue. The wind carried the smell of rain and smoke. That was the first time he asked about my work. Not the article that started it all, but the stories before it, the ones no one read. He knew the names of every person I'd interviewed, every injustice I'd tried to expose. "How do you live?" he asked quietly, knowing the truth changes nothing. I didn't answer, because he was right. In that moment, something fragile cracked inside me. Not affection, not trust, but curiosity. I wanted to understand him, the same way I once wanted to understand the world. And that, I think, was the beginning of my downfall. Days turned into weeks. I learned the language of his empire, the coded phone calls, the subtle exchanges at business meetings that were anything but business. I watched deals unfold that decided the fate of cities. I sat beside him at dinners with men who smiled like friends and plotted like enemies. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to let me in. He'd ask my opinion, he'd listen when I spoke, he'd watch me the way a strategist studies a piece he's not sure whether to protect or sacrifice. And yet, behind the steel and silence, there was something almost human. One night he returned late, bruised, bleeding, exhausted, no guards, no warnings. I found him in the kitchen, pouring whiskey with shaking hands. Without thinking, I reached for a towel, pressed it to his wound, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. He looked at me like he couldn't decide if I was a threat or a miracle. That night, for a moment too brief to name, the world outside didn't exist. It was just the sound of our breaths, the smell of whiskey and blood, and the quiet understanding that neither of us could ever go back to who we were before. But power doesn't sleep for long. The next morning, I woke up to headlines screaming about a sudden shift in control within Leone Corporation, Mara Leone's empire. Her brother had vanished, her assets were frozen, and every rumor pointed to Adrian. That was when I realized I wasn't just living with the enemy, I had married the man who was rewriting the city's power structure in real time. And somewhere deep inside, a part of me didn't want him to stop. They say power changes people, but what no one tells you is that it changes the air around them too. How people breathe when you walk into a room, how silence bends under your presence. It had been 3 months since the day I married Adrian Hale, and somewhere along the line, survival had turned into something else. I wasn't the frightened journalist hiding from death anymore. I was the woman people whispered about in corridors, the one sitting beside Adrian at board meetings, the one whose name began to carry weight. At first, it terrified me. Then I began to understand it. Power was never about money or control. It was about perception, about walking into a room and knowing that everyone had already decided you were dangerous. And the strange thing was, the more they feared me, the safer I felt. Adrian never told me to play the part, but he didn't have to. The city demanded it. His world demanded it. And I learned fast. I wore confidence like armor. I spoke when it mattered and stayed silent when it was wise. I became the mask that kept me alive, elegant, composed, untouchable. But under the surface, the fear never left. Every victory came with a shadow. Every deal meant someone else had lost. And every glance from Adrian reminded me that I was standing beside a man who had built his empire on bones. Yet I couldn't hate him, because with every ruthless decision he made, I saw flashes of something else. The boy who once had nothing, who learned that mercy was weakness, who fought the world until it bent to his will. He never spoke about his past, but the scars on his back told stories his mouth never would. And I knew then, monsters weren't born, they were made. One evening, during a gala at the Hale Foundation, I caught my reflection beside his, and for the first time, I didn't recognize myself. My smile was perfect, my posture regal, but my eyes looked just like his. That terrified me more than any threat ever could. After the guests left, he found me on the balcony, staring at the skyline that had once symbolized freedom to me. "You hate this life," he said quietly, standing close enough for the city's lights to frame us in gold and glass. "I hate what it's turning me into," I whispered. He studied me for a long moment. Then he said something I would never forget. "It's not turning you into anything. It's revealing who you already were." His words struck like lightning, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Somewhere deep inside, I had always wanted control, to stop being the victim, to decide my own story. And now that I had it, I wasn't sure if I deserved it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the empty corridors of the penthouse, the air heavy with the ghosts of power. On Adrian's desk lay a folder, sealed, marked confidential. I told myself not to look, but curiosity had always been my curse. Inside were photos, surveillance images, a woman, dark hair, confident smile. Her name was Mara Leone. The note beneath it read, "Leone assets transferring within 48 hours. Gabriel in position." My heart stopped. Gabriel. The name I hadn't heard in months. The man I once loved. The man who disappeared the night my article went public. He was alive and working for Adrian. In that moment, the world tilted again. I realized I had never escaped the game. I had only changed sides. By dawn, I understood what power truly cost. It wasn't freedom. It wasn't safety. It was the ability to destroy the person you used to be. And I wasn't sure there was any way back. The first time I saw Gabriel again, it was like seeing a ghost that still remembered how you used to breathe. It happened on a Tuesday morning during a meeting at the Hale Foundation. Adrian had left early for a private negotiation with investors, and I was reviewing files when the security system alerted a new entry code being used. I looked up, and there he was, Gabriel. Older, sharper, dressed in the same kind of tailored suit Adrian wore, but with eyes that still carried the warmth I once trusted. For a second, the world narrowed to the sound of my heartbeat. He smiled, that same familiar, crooked smile. "You're hard to find, Elena." I wanted to scream, to demand where he'd been, why he'd left me to drown in the chaos he'd helped create. But my voice betrayed me. It came out as a whisper. "You're alive." He stepped closer, his voice soft but urgent. "Barely. You have no idea what I had to do to survive after your story went public. Adrian's been using you, Elena. You think he married you to protect you? No, he married you to control the narrative." The words cut deeper than they should have, because a part of me had already wondered if he was right. Gabriel's eyes searched mine. "He's building something bigger than you can imagine, a merger that will make him untouchable. He's using your name, your innocence, your reputation as the perfect disguise." I shook my head. "No, you don't know him." But even as I said it, I remembered every moment of silence, every command disguised as concern, every file he never let me touch. Gabriel took a small flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the desk. "Everything's here. The proof, his accounts, his deals, the people he's paid to disappear. You once believed the truth mattered. Prove it still does." Then he was gone, vanishing as suddenly as he appeared. For hours, I just stared at the flash drive. It felt like a live grenade in my hands. Every instinct told me to destroy it, but curiosity, that dangerous old friend of mine, whispered louder. That night, while Adrian was out, I plugged it into my laptop. What I found was worse than I imagined. Offshore accounts, transactions tied to politicians, judges, international corporations, all traced back to the Hale name. But buried deep within the data was something else, a list of operations, code names. One of them stopped my breath. Operation Voss. My name. The details were encrypted, but I didn't need to read them to understand. My marriage wasn't just protection, it was strategy. I was part of his plan all along. When Adrian returned that night, I was waiting in his office. The flash drive lay on the desk between us like a loaded gun. He looked at it, then at me. No anger, no surprise, just resignation. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly. My voice shook. "So it's true? You used me." He stepped closer. "I saved you." "By trapping me?" I demanded. "By turning my life into one of your business acquisitions?" Something flickered in his eyes, maybe pain or guilt. "You were already in the line of fire, Elena. I didn't create your enemies. I just made sure they couldn't reach you. By owning me? He didn't answer, and silence, from a man like Adrian, was confession enough. I turned to leave. His voice stopped me at the door. If you walk out now, they will kill you. I looked back at him, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Then maybe I'll finally be free. I didn't sleep that night. I ran. I used one of the hidden exits I'd memorized weeks ago, disguised in plain clothes, slipping into the veins of the city that had once felt like home. But freedom felt colder than I remembered. Every street corner hid eyes that watched. Every shadow whispered my name. By dawn, I realized the truth. There was no going back. Adrian Hale wasn't chasing me because he wanted to punish me. He was chasing me because without me, his empire would crumble. And that meant I wasn't just running from him. I was running from a part of myself that had begun to belong to his world. For 3 days, I disappeared. I changed my name, dyed my hair, paid for everything in cash. I stayed in a run-down hotel on the outskirts of the city, the kind where no one asked questions because no one wanted answers. Every sound made me flinch. Every knock felt like a warning. But fear has a strange way of sharpening your purpose. I still had the flash drive, and I still had the truth. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. I spent those sleepless nights piecing together everything Gabriel had left me. The transactions, the deals, the encrypted files. Slowly, a picture began to form. It wasn't just Adrian. The corruption ran deeper. A network connecting the Hale Empire, the Liani Corporation, and half the political elite of the city. And at the center of it all, one name appeared again and again. Mara Leone. Adrian's most dangerous rival, and, as I now discovered, Gabriel's real employer. The betrayal came full circle. Gabriel hadn't come to save me, he'd come to use me, again. I remember staring at the cracked ceiling that night, realization settling like ice in my veins. Everyone had been playing a game. I was just the prize they passed between them. But not anymore. By the 4th night, I made my choice. If both Adrian and Mara wanted control, I'd give them something neither could handle: exposure. I encrypted the files, created a time-locked release. If anything happened to me, every secret would go public. It was reckless, desperate, but it was mine. I was packing to leave when the door burst open. 2 men, black suits, silent, efficient, and behind them, Adrian. He looked nothing like the man I'd married. His face was bruised, his expression raw, stripped of the calm that usually wrapped around him like armor. He dismissed the guards with a single word: "Leave us." The room went silent. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "Did you come to finish what you started?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I came to end it." He stepped closer, placing a small envelope on the table. Inside were documents, evidence. The same files I had, but with something more. Proof that it had been Mara Leone who orchestrated the leaks, who'd manipulated Gabriel into betraying both of us. He had known for weeks, and he hadn't retaliated. "I wanted to keep you safe," he said, his voice quiet, almost broken. "But I became the thing you feared, and for that, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to undo it." I stared at him, torn between anger and something softer I didn't want to name. "You can't fix what you've built, Adrian." He met my eyes. "Maybe not, but I can choose what I destroy." Before I could speak, the window shattered. Gunfire ripped through the air. Mara's men. Chaos exploded around us. Adrian pulled me to the floor, shielding me with his body. In that moment, I realized he wasn't protecting his empire anymore. He was protecting me. When it was over, the hotel was silent again. Smoke, shattered glass, the smell of gunpowder. Adrian lay beside me, blood on his shoulder, but still breathing. He smiled faintly, his voice rough. "Told you, I'd keep you safe." Tears burned my eyes as I pressed my hands against the wound. "Don't you dare die on me." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that sounded like regret. Guess I finally learned what love costs. Hours later, the police came. Mara's network collapsed in a single night. My files triggered the release, sending every hidden secret into the light. The empire fell, both hers and his. Adrian survived, barely. But when I saw him again, months later, he was no longer the man who ruled from the shadows. He was a man who had lost everything, except the one thing he never expected to find: me. We met at dawn, on the same rooftop where it had all begun. The city below was quiet for once, washed clean by rain. "I thought you'd hate me forever." I tried, but hate doesn't survive where truth lives. He smiled, tired, real, human. "So what now?" I looked out at the horizon, the light breaking through the clouds. Now we start over. No lies, no empires, just two people learning how to live in the daylight. The city that once devoured us began to wake, unaware of the ghosts we'd buried beneath it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Because sometimes the only way to destroy an empire of shadows is to walk away from the throne.